Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe arrived in Amman at the start of a two-day visit, heading a high-level economic delegation. Abe will hold talks with His Majesty the King and the Prime Minister and senior officials on Jordanian-Japanese ties, as well as regional and international issues. The visit provides an opportunity to capitalize on the outcome of His Majesty's visit to Japan in November, during which the two sides inked a number of bilateral agreements. Abe arrived in Amman following a visit to Cairo, where he met with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Japan has pledged to step up aid to the Middle East, warning that the world would suffer an immeasurable loss due to the spread of terrorism. Abe pledged over $200 million in non-military assistance for countries battling Daesh. The 7th Government Leaders Forum, organized by the Ministry of Public Sector Development, convened under the chairmanship of Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour. The forum aims to help executives in the government share information on public administration reform and best practices as tools towards achieving economic growth. Minister of Public Sector Development Khulal addressed the forum, urging participants to take advantage of Finland's experience in good governance and control of public spending. Deputy Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, and former Prime Minister of Finland, Mari Kiviniemi, spoke about her country's experience in public work, as well as the OECD plans for world countries facing challenges such as corruption and tax evasion. Support for improvement in governance and management is a joint initiative of the European Union and the OECD, aiming to build the capacity of the Ministry of Finance, the Audit Bureau, the Ombudsman, as well as the Anti-Corruption Commission. On the sidelines of the forum, Mansour met with the OECD Deputy Secretary General Mari Kiviniemi. They discussed means to boost cooperation between Jordan and the OECD and possibilities for Jordan to benefit from the organization's expertise in municipalities and public sector reform. The OECD has provided recommendations and guidance to Jordan on ways to offer an investment-friendly environment to foreign investors and multinational companies. Palestinian officials welcomed an announcement by the International Criminal Court that it would launch an inquiry into possible war crimes in the Palestinian territories. ICC prosecutors yesterday said they would examine in full independence and impartiality crimes that may have occurred since June 13 last year, opening a path to possible charges against Israelis and Palestinians. An initial inquiry could lead to war crimes charges against Israel, whether relating to the recent Gaza war or its 47-year-long occupation of the West Bank. Israel rejected the court's decision as hypocrisy and branded the examination as an outrage. The United States also condemned the ICC decision, describing the move as a tragic irony that Israel is now being scrutinized by the ICC.
I believe this is a very important step, however modest, because for the first time in its history, since its creation, Israel is going to be subject to accountability, especially to legal and judicial accountability in terms of its own persistent violations of Palestinian rights and international law. So now this signals to Israel that it is no longer subject to preferential treatment, entitlement, a sense of exceptionalism, and of course impunity and power politics. Israel has to be treated like all other countries in the world, and it has to be subject to the law and not above the law.
This is an important and unprecedented step in the right direction, which gives the Palestinians hope that the Zionist criminal leaders will be prosecuted in the International Criminal Court.
Furthermore, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu slammed as absurd the ICC's decision to launch an inquiry into possible war crimes in the Palestinian territories. He said it was tragic that the lofty goals of the ICC were being turned upside down. His statement came after the UN Secretary General confirmed the Palestinians will formally become an ICC member on April 1st at the request.
Israel rejects the absurd decision of the ICC prosecutor. It's absurd for the ICC to ignore international law and agreements under which the Palestinians don't have a state and can only get one through direct negotiations with Israel. The rules of the ICC are clear. No state, no standing, no case.
The U.S.-led coalition conducted 29 airstrikes on targets of Daesh terrorists in Syria and Iraq during the past 24 hours. The combined Joint Task Force said in a statement that 16 strikes around 7 Iraqi cities destroyed vehicles, buildings, equipment, and fighting positions belonging to Daesh. In Syria, 11 airstrikes were carried out near the city of Kobani, destroying a tank and fighting positions. The Allied forces also hit targets near Abu Kamal and Deir ez-Zor. On the ground in Syria, government forces and Syrian Kurds battled in the predominantly Kurdish northeast. The violence broke out when army soldiers and allied militiamen took control of buildings in a demilitarized area. The army shelled 3 Kurdish majority areas on the edges of Hasaka city, while Kurdish fighters arrested soldiers and Ba'ath Party gunmen. This is the first time that Syrian Kurds fight government loyalists in a territorial dispute, breaking a long-standing agreement between the two sides to focus on other enemies. And in Iraq, Daesh have freed around 350 members of Iraq's Yazidi minority and have delivered them to safety in Kirkuk, the country's Kurdish north. Almost all those released were elderly, disabled, or unwell and included several infants with serious illnesses. Kurdish Peshmerga forces drove back Daesh terrorists in northwestern Iraq last month, breaking a long siege of Sinjar mountain where thousands of Yazidis were stranded for months, but many Yazidi villages remain under Daesh control. Last summer, the terrorists attacked the northwest, where they killed or captured and enslaved thousands of Yazidis. Some fled to the autonomous Kurdistan region, where they are living in camps along with other displaced religious and ethnic minorities. Houthi gunmen seized Ahmed Awad bin Mubarak, office director for President Abd Rabbo Mansour Hadi, in the capital Sana'a early today to stop him from attending a meeting which was to discuss a draft of the constitution. According to attendees, the movement's representatives withdrew from the meeting, a move which threatens to intensify political turmoil and insecurity in the country where there's an active Al-Qaeda wing. The Houthi militia, which controls Sana'a, has denounced leaked details of a draft constitution. President Hadi had said the constitution would ensure the country does not fragment into 2 regions based on the former states or North and South Yemen. An explosion outside the Algerian embassy in Libya's capital, Tripoli, slightly wounded 2 guards and damaged nearby vehicles. Libya's recognized government denounced the explosion in a statement as a cheap attempt to undermine UN-sponsored peace talks, which started this week in Geneva. Algeria and most other countries evacuated their diplomats in the summer during fighting between rival factions battling for control of Libya 3 years after the fall of Muammar Gaddafi. Explosions in November targeted the Egyptian and United Arab Emirates embassies in Tripoli. Belgium is deploying hundreds of troops to guard possible terrorism targets following deadly raids on a terrorist cell. Up to 300 military will be stationed at locations such as a U.S. embassy in Brussels, as well as NATO and EU institutions. Troops will reinforce police at least until Thursday, when authorities will review the national threat level, which was this week set at 3 on a scale of 4. There are also soldiers in Antwerp, the country's second-largest city. The government raised that threat level after a raid in the East Belgian town of Verviers on Thursday, in which police shot 2 gunmen that they suspected were part of a cell preparing an attack. A truck fire has halted rail service through the Channel Tunnel between Britain and France. Tunnel operator Eurotunnel evacuated the shuttle train and closed the subsea crossing because of smoke and said it was investigating the cause. Eurostar, which operates train services through the tunnel between Paris, London and Brussels, also halted service, saying all trains en route would return to their original stations. Passengers were advised to postpone journeys and not come to stations. French authorities said they were dealing with the incident that occurred at the Calais end of the crossing. And just a while ago, news from Egypt stated that Faten Hamama, known as Sayyidat Ash-Shasha Al-Arabiya, or the Lady of the Arab Screen, has passed away at the age of 83. Her son Tariq al-Sharif confirmed the news of her passing to international media. Acclaimed actress of film and television and revered as an icon in Egyptian and Middle Eastern cinema, Faten Hamama made her film debut at the very young age of 7 years. She was chosen the star of the century at the 2001 Alexandria International Festival, honoring her lifetime of achievement in Egyptian cinema. She was once married to renowned actor Omar Sharif, with whom she has her son Tariq. Hamama also has a daughter, Nadia, with film director Izzeddin Dhulfuqar. Google announced it is stopping sales of its current Google Glass product around the world in a move that many have interpreted as an admission of failure. However, the company insisted it is not abandoning the project and said it will continue to invest in its Glass at Work offering for enterprise developers and companies and plans to release future versions of Glass when they are ready. Glass has been beset with controversy ever since the Explorer program first launched due to the ability of the wearer to take photos and record videos. The device has since been banned in bars, cars, cinemas, hospitals and banks. Glass and wearable devices overall amount to a new technology, as smartphones once were, that will likely take time to evolve into a product that clicks with consumers. We begin with La Liga and Real Madrid's preparation to face Getafe tomorrow as they seek to protect their 1-point lead over second-place Barcelona with a game in hand. Real now will concentrate on La Liga and the Champions League after they exited the Copa del Rey to Atletico. They drew 2-2 at home, sending Atletico through 4-2 on aggregate. Real Madrid coach Carlo Ancelotti said his team is adamant to win the La Liga title and are in a good position and will keep it that way. And Barcelona tomorrow face 16th place Deportivo de La Coruna in a very tough La Liga match. Barca second with 41 points after Real Madrid come from a 4-0 victory over Elche and will play Atletico Madrid next week in the Copa del Rey. Coach Luis Enrique insisted Barca had its mind only on securing the second term of the season and on winning titles, as they were all still at stake. Equatorial Guinea drew 1-1 with Congo in the opening game of the African Nations Cup finals in Bata, Equatorial Guinea. These small Central African countries stepped in 2 months ago to take over as hosts after Morocco pulled out and have had only weeks to prepare for the 3-week 16-team tournament. Equatorial Guinea has undergone extensive changes in personnel, and uncertainty over their potential has been exacerbated by a change of coach 3 weeks before kickoff. Burkina Faso and Gabon are now playing in a second Group A encounter. And finally, for a quick look at the weather, cold weather with partly cloudy skies prevails tonight with possible rainfall. Tomorrow, a rise in temperature is expected, but it remains relatively cold in most regions with northwesterly moderate winds. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect fair conditions tomorrow with northerly moderate to brisk winds and slightly choppy seas. The weatherman warns of frost in the late hours of the night in most regions and of poor visibility due to fog. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. The 7th Government Leaders Forum convenes in Amman, aiming to help executives in the government share information on public administration reform and best practices to achieve economic growth. Palestinian officials welcome the International Criminal Court's inquiry into possible war crimes in the Palestinian territories, while Israeli Prime Minister calls it an absurd decision. And Belgium deploys hundreds of troops to guard possible terrorism targets following deadly raids on a terrorist cell. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Aliya Tuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.